This week's movie rant is everyone's favorite archaeologist, who's actually really bad at archaeology, Indiana Jones. Um, Wearing appropriate shirt here, which I got, I think, when Blockbuster closed for like $4. So we have this box set with the first three movies. One of my complaints is the menu on each of them kind of gives away the movies. Like, they'll have scenes from the movies, which are kind of spoilers, and it's like, guys, what are you doing? But obviously, spoiler warning for this video, because I'm gonna give away stuff. But it's like, dude, if I was lending this to somebody who hadn't seen it, if they leave it on the menu for a couple seconds, half the movie's ruined. Like, guys, what are you doing? Sorry if the music is freaking out. I'm just gonna turn it off. It's freaking out too much. So firstly, we have Raiders of the Lost Ark. Sadly, none of these movies have commentaries, which seems to be kind of par for the course for a Spielberg film. If any of you know Mr. Spielberg, could you talk to him? Like, what's he doing right now? He could totally record commentaries for all of his films. Just saying. Just throwing that out there, if any of you guys know him. There are some pretty informative featurettes on here, but slight consolation, it's not the same. This movie does feature, very briefly, a young Alfred Molina, who you will know as Doc Ock from the Spider-Man movies. And if you've been watching along with us, he was Cesar in Lady Hawk, the wolf trapper guy. This also features the now iconic music written by John Williams, who you might have heard earlier, but it's glitchy. He has worked on all but 2 Spielberg films, so they obviously get along. I know Ready Player One is one of the films that he did not work on. I think Sugarland Express is the other film. I didn't actually look it up, so if you guys did, feel free to comment. So one thing I learned after watching this was Steven Spielberg and a lady named Melissa Matheson wrote a script during shooting breaks on the location of this film. Matheson was there to visit her then husband, Harrison Ford, and Spielberg dictated to her a story idea he had. That script was eventually called E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Right? So we wouldn't have E.T. without this movie, which is it's crazy. Another thing I noticed while watching it is that Indy flies Pan Am Airlines, which is the same airlines the family flies on in Hook, and it's predominantly featured in prominently. I can speak. Prominently featured in Catch Me If You Can, both of which are directed by Spielberg. Did Spielberg sign some deal with them back in the day before they went out of business, and he's just like, nah, I'm still going to hold up my end of the bargain? Like, it's weird. You'll notice it now, trust me. Also, apparently, Brody says the wrong year for when the Pharaoh reigned, when he's talking to, like, the government guys. But, like, we do learn in Last Crusade that he got lost once in his own museum, so maybe he isn't the most reliable source. Just saying. Not gonna lie, there are some pretty cringy parts, like, watching it now as an adult. Like, clearly he had a relationship with Marion when she was underage. Like, she's about 25 in the film, and that would have made her about 15, and Indy was a college student. It, it's a little cringy. Um, the whole line, like, I was a child, it was wrong and you knew it. And it's like, that that don't that don't sound right. Um, Also, like, Sulla is an Egyptian, but he is played by John Rhys Davies, who is Welsh. I love John Rhys Davies, but it's a little like you couldn't have found an Egyptian actor. Also, there's the Nepalese henchman of the Nazi guy, Tot, I think his name is. His henchmen are very obvious Caucasians in Asian makeup, what is called yellow face by some. Um, it's very cringy and obvious once you notice it. Like, this film was made in 1981. Yes, it's about the 30s and late 30s and early 40s, but like, it shouldn't be having the same issues that those movies did. Yeah. On to scenes that I loved. I loved the scene where they're in the Well of Souls and Indy puts his staff, in the little hole and the light shines through. It's just so cinematic. Honestly, it could have been a silent film. But yeah, it's so cool. It does have great music in that moment as well. Um, One funny thing about that scene is that the Nazis roped off their dig site, like, on the little model. Like, who bought the itty bitty little stanchions, and why did they write on it? Like, they're the only ones going in there. Like, why? I also, of course, love me a good Nazi melting scene. There was a great featurette on here that showed how that effect was done. So if any of you young kids are making a movie and you need some melted Nazis, here's your go-to resource. Apparently, Steven Soderbergh, he directed the Ocean's 11 films, as well as some other films. He made a black and white version of this, which I will link below, and he replaced the soundtrack. So, might be worth a watch. I haven't myself watched it yet. So, next up, we have, once I pick up the right one, Temple of Doom. I do feel like Indiana Jones movies are kind of the opposite of Star Trek movies, where the odd ones are the good ones in this case. Keeping it real here. This one takes place before Raiders because they didn't want to explain why he was not with Marion anymore, even though they explain it later in Crystal Skull. Anyways, the dance number at the beginning is an obvious homage to 32nd Street, which is directed by Busby Berkeley. Is a classic film that has been referenced in many movies over the years. So if you do get a chance to watch it, it will seem very familiar to you. It was a little awkward to notice that Indy's friend at the very beginning was named Wuhan. Just saying, a little awkward in 2020. If you keep a keen eye out, you might notice that the name of the club at the beginning is Club Obi-Wan. Dan Aykroyd has a small cameo where Indy tells him he owes him, or where he tells Indy that he owes him some gin. This made me crack up because Dan Aykroyd owns the Skull Gin Company in real life. If you ever go into a liquor store and you see those, like, glass skulls of gin, that's Dan Aykroyd's company. So, That's why he doesn't have to ask that much anymore. Um, I do feel like they doubled down on the grossness here, specifically the banquet scene where they are served in order. Snake surprise, surprise. It's a snake filled with snakes. Not even joking. And then bugs, and then eyeball soup, and finally chilled monkey brains. It kind of reminded me of the scene from Robin Hood Men in Tights, where he's like, it looks like a satyr at Vincent Price's house. Like, this whole scene. And then there's just scenes with all these bugs, and it's like, why? It's like, a couple of bugs is bad enough. Millions of bugs, no. Willie Scott, the girl in the film, who later became Spielberg's wife, Kate Capshaw. Anyways, Willie Scott screams 71 times in the movie, which means if you made it into a drinking game and took a shot every time she screamed, you would die of alcohol poisoning about halfway in. To be honest, I don't like her character, and it's not because of the screams. It's not because of the whining. She does a lot of whining. It's because she said she didn't like elephants. Like, girl, no. You respect elephants. So the Wilhelm scream can be heard when Mola Ram, the main bad guy, is being eaten by alligators, which is funny because that like soundbite was originally from a movie where a guy named Wilhelm was getting eaten by alligators. Next up we have, wherever I am on the screen. Next up we have Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. This one is my favorite. When I was going to get my first communion, I was raised Catholic, if you guys didn't know that. My mom made me this little Holy Grail thing. She painted gold in there. It's just a little, like, egg holder, but she made it in that because I love this movie so much. This movie was the first Indiana Jones movie to be rated PG-13, despite being, like, the tamest one. PG-13 was basically invented because of Temple of Doom. Like, it was so gross and violent, but not, like, enough to be rated R. So it was one of the ones that kind of encouraged the conversation of, hey, maybe we should have an in-between rating. So this one became PG-13. So the young Indiana Jones is played by River Phoenix, who you might know from Stand By Me and The Explorers, and you younger viewers might know him just from being Joaquin Phoenix's older brother. He passed away quite young at the age of 23. So if you want to look him up, he was a decent actor before that. Donovan's wife is played by that actor's real life wife, and she's even credited as such. His last name is Glover, so it says like Mrs. Donovan, played by Mrs. Glover. Also, when she comes in to be like, your guests, they miss you, you can hear the Imperial March being played on the piano, and it's kind of a reference because he did play an Imperial officer in Empire Strikes Back, so it's a nice little nod. Also, I'm not sure if this is exactly a trope, but Donovan says don't trust anyone, and is himself the man who shouldn't be trusted. The same line is spoken by Beckett in Solo, and he is also less than trustworthy. So feel like this is used quite a bit in movies. Um, Apparently, the costume designers found a cache of Nazi uniforms, so those are real vintage uniforms, especially during the book burning scene. It's just crazy. Um, oh, fun fact: Harrison Ford is now older by quite a bit than Sean Connery was when he played his dad. Sean Connery is only 12 years older than Harrison Ford, so I've I've always kind of wondered if Elsa chose the wrong Grail on purpose, you know, which gives it to Donovan. Because, like, as soon as he's dead, she was like, oh, it wouldn't have been a fancy cup. And it's like, did you not know that 2 seconds ago? Before he got all dustified? Um, that scene freaked me out as a kid when he chose poorly and, you know, dissolves. Um, our first copy of this movie was taped off television, and I edited that scene out. Was not a fan. The four horses that they take as they leave and, you know, ride off into the sunset, those were actually loaned by the King of Jordan. Jordan was where part of the movie was filmed, including especially Petra. Petra, the location of the temple at the end, was not that popular before the movie came out, but has since become like a must-see tourist spot, and like thousands of people visit it every year. So this trilogy was clearly being put together while the fourth one was being made. As the special features, they have some of the cast of the new movie like in their costumes, talking about these older movies, even though they didn't have anything to do with them. It's like why? Well, it's like why would you make a box set if you knew you were making another one? And why would you let them talk? And they have no more input than I, a casual watcher, because that's all they were for the original movies. So there is also a TV series entitled The Chronicles of Young Indiana Jones, which is available via Amazon. However, I decided to just focus on the films for this video, but if you have the time, some of them are quite enjoyable. So, unfortunately, we must go on. Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. So, first thing I'd like to complain about is Cate Blanchett's hair. Yeah, right there. Like, this hairstyle is straight out of the 1920s. Specifically, it's very clearly a reference to an actress named Louise Brooks, who was a silent film star. Cate Blanchett's character is supposed to be a 1950s Soviet officer, so it's 30 years out of style. I googled Soviet hairstyles, and they were basically the same as their contemporaries in the US, like maybe a few years behind, but not 30 years. And like it's honestly such a fussy haircut. Like you have to like trim everything all the time. Like it seemed incredulous to me. It's very glaring. I know, I'm very very nitpicky. Also, I'm guessing the same DVD company made this one as the trilogy because it had the same spoiler-laden menu. This movie just kind of seems soulless. There's an excessive amount of CG. Like, dude, Mr. Spielberg, you directed Jurassic Park. You are better than this. Now, I know specifically people complained about the scene with the monkeys, but the whole sequence, like, leading up to it of sword fighting on the back of Jeeps is also ridiculous looking. Like, don't just single out the monkeys. It's bunch of it. Also, I find Crystal Skulls kind of dumb. Like, the vast majority are forgeries, and I don't know. It just seemed kind of like all three of these ones had like religious or spiritual objects, and then this one is like aliens. Um, it definitely just seemed like a cash grab. There are rumors of a fifth Indiana Jones movie. We'll see. Oh, and honestly, I do want to say I don't blame Shia LaBeouf. I know some people like complained about him at the time, but he's not the worst thing in this movie. So lay off Shia. Don't make him go any more crazy. But yeah, overall, I love these movies. I'd say stop at Last Crusade. Like, it's a perfect way to end it with them just riding off into the sunset. You don't need Crystal Skull at all. And yeah. So, if you haven't seen it in a while, I recommend these three. Only those three. Oh, I did want to point out, I did get this one from Blockbuster. Um, it was off like the discount table, like previously viewed ones, so this itself could be a relic of the past since out of business. Just kind of ironic. Anyways, happy viewing. We'll see you later.